Welcome to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. So glad to have you with me today because my guest today is one of my favorite people in the whole world. We are here on the eve of Veterans Day. And so my dad, Jack Gutman, who is truly my favorite veteran, will be joining us very shortly. But first, we have a couple of things to talk about. So, those of you who may be new to the show, welcome to Change It Up Radio. I am your host, Paula Shaw, and I am a life transition coach. This show and my work and pretty much everything I do has to do with change. My work is about helping people deal with change because change, while we need it to keep life interesting and for growth, it's tricky for humans. You know, we don't like the discomfort of the unfamiliar. And then, of course, there are those changes that come that are unwelcome, like a death, a divorce, a bad health diagnosis. There are many kinds of changes that find us because change is the one constant in life. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. So our job here at Change It Up Radio is to bring you information to help make change smoother and more productive, and to also spotlight people who are change makers, who are trying to make the world a better place. So if you'd like to learn more about my work, either as a life transition coach or as an author or speaker, you can get that information at paulashaw.com. And while you're there, be sure you grab my free gift. It's called 20 Things to Say and Not to Say to People in Pain. And it's a kind of a cheat sheet that came off of my most recent book, Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say. Because there's a real problem that we have as humans trying to support our friends, our family, our brothers and sisters when they're in emotional pain. We don't know what to say. It's kind of tricky. We don't want to make them feel worse, and yet we want to be there to support. And what I found over my years of counseling people who said to me, nobody called, nobody came by, nobody showed up to support me. I know the reason that happens is because too often we feel awkward, we don't know what to say, and so we keep putting it off until it doesn't happen. So saying the right thing when you don't know what to say gives you specific guidance and specific sentences to say and not to say. So you can read that book and really prepare yourself to be able to be successful at comforting, supportive conversations. My other book that is really helpful when people are going through hard times is Grief. When Will This Pain Ever End? And that, of course, is how we feel when we're going through grief experiences. It seems like we're never going to have life be the same. It's never going to feel normal. It's never going to feel comfortable again. And my grief book has very short chapters and then lots of articles, processes, and tools to help you be able to move through your grief and not get stuck in it, and also be able to help others and understand others better who are going through grief experiences. So please check out those books on Amazon. I've also got another one called Chakras, the Magnificent Seven, that's about balancing and working with your chakra system for overall better health, better emotional health, and greater calm and peace of mind. So those are my books. And as I said, if you'd like to learn more about my speaking or to arrange a complimentary consultation with me, You can get all that info at paulashaw.com. And if you want more info about this podcast or information about being a guest or a sponsor of this show, you can get all that information at changeitupradio.com. That's changeitupradio.com. All right. Now, we were just discussing Veterans Day, which is happening tomorrow. And in fact, it may be happening today, depending on when we actually post this show. But Veterans Day is an interesting holiday. Of course, it's a national holiday here in the U.S., and it actually originated because World War II, the fighting stopped on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And so they decided to always honor that 11th day of the 11th month. And at first it was called Armistice Day. I even actually, I don't exactly remember it because it changed in 1954 and I wasn't very young or very old at that point in time. I was very young. But then it became Veterans Day. And it's a day to honor veterans, all of the armed forces of the United States of America. It's a day that I think we all have in our consciousness, thank you for your service. And we really mean it. Now, Memorial Day is a day to honor those who were fallen in battle. But Veterans Day is about everybody who's ever served. And so my favorite veteran is my dad, Jack Gutman, who I am about to introduce you to. But first, let me give you a little background on him so that you can know him a little better as well. He was born in San Francisco in 1925, but spent actually most of his growing up years in New York City, where survival meant belonging to a gang. And he did. He belonged to a gang called the Panthers. At 17 years of age, when most of us are about to have our senior year, he wanted desperately to serve his country, and World War II was building up. So he talked his dad into signing for him and enlisted in the Navy because, of course, you're supposed to be 18. After training for months as a medical corpsman, his first active duty took him to England, preparing for something that nobody really knew what it was at that time. They were preparing for something big. That's pretty much all they knew. But he was in England until a day that we now know as D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. And that's when he went into action. He was there on D-Day between Utah and Omaha beaches. That's where he landed. He later served the same function in the invasion of Okinawa. Dad's one of the few who actually had to serve in both invasions. So that was something very, very unique for him. Unfortunately, all of that trauma to one so young set him up for PTSD, which he dealt with for 66 years until he finally got counseling from the VA, and we'll be talking to him about that today. Along the way, he's explored many career paths. He was a stand-up comedian. He's been a manager of a thrifty drugstore. He has sold everything from sewing machines to adhesives. But mostly Dad today finds his greatest joy in speaking and trying to encourage veterans who are suffering with PTSD to get help. He also does that through his book called One Veteran's Journey to heal the wounds of war. So, I think so that we'll actually have time for the interview. We need to stop looking at the bio and start talking to Dad. So, Dad, would you please join us? There you are. Hello. Have you got your mic on too?
Yes. How
Oh,
are you?
perfect, perfect. All right, now that we have you, if you want to just relax, you can take your glasses off if you like so we can see your eyes better. There you are. Hey, Dad, how are you doing today?
Very good, and I thank you. It's actually very good to be back with you again, and thank you for the very nice introduction.
Well, you are very welcome. That's true. For any of you who are new to this show, Dad is a repeat guest because he's always the best person I know to bring on Memorial Day, on D Day, and Veterans Day. So this is a kind of a repeat performance for him. But we're going to talk about some different things today. So, Dad, I mentioned in your bio that you were there on D Day at Normandy. And I think, we've talked before about that, but maybe just briefly give them some idea of what it felt like for a 17-year-old kid, basically, or maybe were you 18 by D Day?
Yes,
You had
I
just,
was
okay,
18.
you had turned 18. But I can't even imagine what it feels like for an 18-year-old to be in the middle of the explosions and the gunfire and all of that that was part of D Day. So let's just start off by briefly talking about that for a moment. What did it feel like? What was it like, Dad?
Well, actually, my job was, since we set up the hospital in England, Netley, England, it was a huge hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could just seat thousands. We had over 2,000 medical groups there, and we set it up for 5 months before this invasion. We didn't even know what it was. But while we were getting all of our training and get everything fixed up for something big, it turned out that uh, a group of us, about 40 or 50 of us, uh, were taken off and were being trained to climb down ropes and hit beaches and so forth. And we hadn't any idea what that was all about. But it turned out that it was going to be the Normandy invasion.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to help the medical group that was on the making the initial invasion on D-Day,
Uh-huh.
and we would just evacuate any wounded. We would go in about, say, 2 or 3 hours after the initial invasion,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of thought it would be a cakewalk. Now, we were told not to tell anyone. It was hush hush. Otherwise, we'd be court-martialed and possibly shot.
Wow. Wow.
And
That
when you're
must have been
18, it scares
scary.
you, you
Yeah,
know.
I was going to say, very scary.
Yes. And so what happened is the, it turned out that I thought I was going to be going to Utah Beach, and when they started with the cannons and on the shells hitting the beaches, there were bunkers up on top of the hill that the Germans were entrenched in,
Uh-huh.
and it was very, very strongly fortified. And we were to have bombs that are going to drop on it. There was a little over 11,000 planes involved with this, various
Wow.
things, 150,000 troops, um, 5,000 ships, and 4,500 LSDs and those the boats that hit the
Oh,
beaches,
landing craft. Is that
landing craft.
landing
That's
craft?
right.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was a huge, huge thing. Now, with all of the shells and hitting the beaches and so forth, and then we thought with the planes going over, dropping the bombs, they were supposed to hit the bunkers and then annihilate them, and it would make it easy for the forces going in.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, it turned out that the bombs missed the target because of cloud cover 1 mile, and it dropped a mile past the bunkers. And the poor invading forces that came in on the sixth, seventh waves um, really caught it, and we lost many, many, many men. I think we finally
So
settled out.
just so
So
I'm clear, Dad, what you're saying is the the planes that were supposed to drop bombs on those German bunkers and take those big guns out dropped the bombs too far in, and so those guns were still operational.
no, they dropped. They went on past the bunkers
Right,
because
that's
they
what I
were
mean.
told when you think you're at the beach, drop the bombs.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, with I guess the speeds or whatever it is, the bombs dropped over a mile past the bunkers.
got it. So there
So
wasn't that.
it was just
Mm,
a thing. Now we seeing all of this in our group, we were coming in 2 or 3 hours later. We figured it would be a cakewalk. Unfortunately, when you came in there, here's an 18-year-old guy not expecting what he was going to see,
mm,
seeing bodies in the water, seeing um, um, body parts on the beach, which was unfortunate.
mm.
Um, I think the picture Saving Private Ryan was a good example of it, and they captured it pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
but not as quite as bad as it really was.
Let me ask you something, Dad. Sometimes when we're in the midst of something really horrifying or shocking, we just sort of go numb and we go into action and we do what we have to do. Or sometimes we freeze and we can't do anything. Do you remember what your experience was?
But when I came, the ramps normally when you come up against with the LCVPs, the landing crafts,
Uh huh.
you come up. Your normal training is that goes right up to the beach. The ramp goes down,
Uh
and the
huh.
next thing you know, you just run off onto the sand.
Right.
Fortunately, the Germans have set up poles and all kinds of things in the water out a little further. And so therefore we could not go over there. And they also had mines set on those poles, and they would actually be shooting at that. And as they exploded, it killed a lot of people and blew up the LCV boats that were
Right.
going in.
Right.
We had to walk in water up to almost to our chests to get
Mm-hmm.
into it. And you've seen the bodies around there. And there were a lot of guys when the ramps went down and the German machine guns they had machine guns that could shoot off 150 bullets a minute. And they were just mowing guys down as they came off the ramp. A lot of guys jumped off, which I found out from talking to some of the wounded, that they jumped off the side of the boat, and with the heavy packs, they they went right on down because it was over their heads, and they drowned if they couldn't get the
Mm.
packs off. It was like an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I
And I
mean,
tell you, it really was.
I can't imagine being that young, seeing something obviously you'd never seen anything like it in your life. Probably nobody there had, even if they'd ever been in battle, but certainly not a young person like yourself. You had never been in battle before, so I'm sure it was terrifying. But
Right.
you lived through the day, thank God. And those of us who you brought to the earth afterwards are very grateful that you lived through that day. But what do you remember what you felt like when you heard that now you were being assigned to be part of the invasion of Okinawa?
Well, actually, there was so many things that, and it's all of this is in my book, One Veteran's Journey to Heal the Wounds of War,
Uh-huh.
in the details of what was happening. I mean, the guys screaming "Mama, Mama" on the beach and all, and you hear that no matter where it is, because these are young men. All of these young men were the same age as I am,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe in their 20s or something. The officers were a little older, but we lost on that Normandy. We lost over 9,000 men.
Yes, it's
And
horrible. But
so many
my
were wounded.
my
And
point is though, Dad, because I know you and I have discussed Normandy
yeah,
other times in other interviews, but I'm wondering now you heard that you're going to be assigned to be part of another invasion. Do you
yes.
remember what that felt like in
Well,
your within
uh,
yourself?
yeah. Well, I personally thought I was going to get stateside duty after I got my leave after Normandy,
Uh-huh.
and but I was sent to Oceanside, California. That's where you live now.
Yes.
And it's interesting, it was changed. But I went through, we belonged to the Beach Battalion, and we trained for invasions and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. And I trained with the Marines because we are the Marine Corps medics. See, the
Uh-huh.
Marine Corps medics, because they don't have medics, they have the Navy medics. Well,
Right.
we were assigned to go to on a ship called the Gutman, and then onto a buoy called buoy. Uh, it was an EPA. It's called Auxiliary Personnel Assault, and
Okay.
we went on to invade Okinawa. That was like an absolute nightmare to realize all of a sudden I'm going to be in my second invasion,
Mm-hmm.
and it was not as bad as it was on the beach of Normandy, because there was lots of killing and dying in the caves of Okinawa. However,
Oh.
we lost 14,000 men that died in Okinawa.
Wow.
62,000 was wounded on that total battle.
Mm-hmm.
Those Japanese fought hard. And we had those Japanese kamikaze planes. That was something new to me, which
Mm-hmm.
I had carried for many years, to see a man actually in a plane with a bomb on it go right into a ship and blow it up and kill himself purposely.
And
Would you?
Dad, do you know what? Tell us a little more about that because I remember you telling me, weren't you standing on the deck of your
Yeah,
ship? So you were almost at eye level with the pilot?
yes. What had happened, I was just finishing doing some duty, helping in surgery and taking care of patients. And I was taking my break, and I was up on the deck having a cigarette. And all of a sudden, we hear an alarm go off. And then I hear boom, boom, boom. The big guns went off. And that actually, by the way, took out half my hearing. And I'm running to my battle station, and I see these planes coming in and see them hit various ships. But one came in right between my ship and the battleship New Mexico. Now, I had never seen a kamikaze plane, especially a man. This guy came in very low, and you could almost see the sternness. And he turned right into the battleship New Mexico, hit the bridge, and we found out later that one pilot, young man, killed himself and 80 American sailors, plus the
Wow.
captain of that ship, of the
Oh,
battleship New
oh my
Mexico.
God. Oh, that's awful. So so let's go kind of fast forward a little bit to obviously You had some major traumatic experiences that happened in this time that you served your country. And as I mentioned in your introduction, this led to 66 years of PTSD. Now,
Yes.
as your child, I if anybody said to me, was your did your dad behave in any unusual way? Were you able to tell that he was suffering from PTSD? And I would say no. That you were just this great guy who we couldn't wait to come home from work every day so we could play and have fun. But on the other side, you were experiencing some things that I obviously wasn't seeing. So share with our listeners a little bit about how did your PTSD show its face? How did it manifest?
Well, actually, from Normandy on to after I was back to England and then leave, um, I started getting some flashbacks about what was happening. And
Mm-hmm.
it was the kind of a nerve wracking, and then it was, I couldn't understand what was happening to me, but they said it's battle fatigue and you'll get over it. But the things is this, my flashbacks, which I remember you encouraging me when I was writing my book to mention what it was, my flashbacks were always, I kept seeing the battle scenes, landing on the beaches, the bombing, the men screaming, mama, 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 and body parts all over the place, and then the bodies laying on the water.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all magnified. And it was just traumatic. And
Yeah.
so I kept getting worse and worse. There would be longer times, then they would go away. And since I once spent, while I was getting my training, 2 weeks into a mental ward as a corpsman, were taking care of these people who were insane. I saw what happened there and it scared me. So I figured if I tell people what's happening to me, they would wind up putting me into a mental institution.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept everything quiet. I never told people I was in the Navy or anything. That's why my family never really knew. And I did crazy, crazy things that I just couldn't believe till I got my well, you started it with that heavy drink, and you got me to stop drinking with your training from uh,
The grief
grief
recovery.
recovery.
Yeah,
Grief
yeah.
recovery, that helped me, that got me to stop drinking. And from that point on, I was willing to go to training, but that your recovery thing started the whole thing where I could get back to normal because it was a horrible way of living the way I was.
Well,
And then,
Dad, if I can just make a quick point here, I think until that grief group, you didn't realize, and this is a point that I really try to stress to people, PTSD is a manifestation of grief because grief is the normal natural response to any loss. And you had losses galore as a result of the war, loss of innocence, loss of your idea of how life was supposed to be, besides the losses that occurred in seeing people blown up when you were raised all your life to be kind to people, and in
right,
the situation that war puts us in is very difficult for any human being. It's not a normal situation to try to hurt others. So the wounds are many. And I think what helped you the most in that grief group was realizing the losses that you actually suffered in your time in the service, and that you weren't able to function normally for very good reasons. PTSD is sort of like your psyche's way of screaming, we're in trouble here.
right.
We're really in trouble.
Well, the one thing that in my PTSD, I until you got a hold of me a little bit and we started with that, I was starting to go into depression, and then I realized I needed to find goals to excel in various things. So various jobs that I got into, which I bring out in my book. Um, I tried to excel, which I did, which would put me on a positive um, way of feeling a little bit better about myself.
Yes.
And so I went into show business and did well with that. I was in sales, as you mentioned before, and became successful in those. The flashbacks were always there, but it was just uh, decreased by the successes that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So it was doing the crazy things I was doing still kept coming. And that was caused me to get help from the veterans finally.
Finally. And you did what a lot of veterans have done when they are suffering PTSD. They try to self medicate or engage in behaviors that distract them from the emotional pain that they're feeling. And so in your case, it was drinking, correct?
Right. As a matter of fact, that was one of the main things that finally got me where you got me to go to your grief program,
Mm-hmm.
is that it was a Thanksgiving. It's embarrassing to say it, but I was with my family. And if I came to your house, I wouldn't bring one bottle of wine. I'd bring a gallon of wine or a magnum of champagne. So I make sure I wouldn't run out. And I was drinking so much that when they finally served the Thanksgiving dinner, Jack Gutman's face fell into the plate in front of my whole family.
Yes, I remember that.
It was the most embarrassing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the family was going to have a meeting with me. I forget what they call it.
Intervention.
Intervention, that's it.
Yes.
And I probably would have fought it, but they were very kind about it. And then you got me to go to this meeting, and that started the whole thing. And
Yes, and you did
my
talk.
whole life changed after that. That's why I tell people, don't commit suicide. Don't let things happen to you where you can just uh, feel, if I die, that'll be the end of it. There is such great hope. My whole life has changed since then.
Mm-hmm. Hugely. And so you did some time in AA, as I recall. You went to
Yes.
program for a while, and then you found a therapist that you love,
Yeah.
Dylan Bender.
Dylan Bender. Yes.
Yes, and how long did you work with Dylan? I think it would be fun to tell our listeners the story of the first session you had with Dylan.
Yeah. It was it was my first time and I with Dylan Bender, and he is such a great therapist, and he helped me so much, and he was so patient with me, and he took me back on that first session back to Normandy, um, and it was so traumatic for me, and I cried, and I was so upset with it. And then he said to me, Jack, these are the um, uh, ice cubes that are mentally in your head that will be melted down, and eventually you'll be able to talk about it. I never could believe that could happen, that someday I would be up talking to people about this.
Mm-hmm.
But and he says, so it'll change your whole life. And he says, I'll look forward to seeing you next week. And I was thinking in my mind, you're certainly not going to see me. I'm not going to go through this again. And then I was driving home and I kept thinking, I've been going 66 years doing crazy things. I've got to do something and change this all over. So I finally went back to him, and I think it was about 2.5 years or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
totally with his patience and understanding, um, just cleared me and made a whole new life for me. Now my whole life is wanting to touch lives.
And urge other veterans or other, one of the points I think we should make is PTSD is not exclusive to war veterans. Post traumatic stress disorder occurs anytime a person experiences something horrifying and traumatic. It doesn't matter if it's being robbed or having your purse stolen or having somebody assault you in the street or even a car accident or an earthquake. And all of these kinds of things that produce traumatic experiences can produce PTSD.
Right.
And so I think, I love it that you're urging veterans to get help because so many veterans, oh my God, there was some statistic that was horrible that more veterans died of suicide than died in Vietnam
Right.
because this is pain, this is torture. You know, we as your family are blessed that you found a way to cope as best you could, and today you have a life that's joyful and wonderful. And but a lot of people, especially if they then complicate the situation even more with drugs and alcohol, then
Right.
their thinking becomes even foggier and they can make terrible choices like suicide. And
Right.
it's so sad. I love that you mentioned that, Dad. It's so sad when somebody ends their life when there are amazing resources available to help them.
You know, since you brought that up, when I speak at different groups, I always want to say one thing, and I say this especially since this is Veterans Day, and I want to say to all the veterans that are in the service today, and I've been in the service all the way back to where I was, World War II, the millions of you who gave your life, who are wounded, and are probably sitting around thinking you're not important. And I want you to understand one thing. You got to believe you are important. You were important then, you are important now, because there are people that need to hear your story and how you overcame it. And then there are a whole bunch of people who are not service people, who have not been in the war, but have gone through, like Paula said, these trauma things with mental anguishes that are just so tough, and they go through PTSD and all
Mm-hmm.
the various things. You become very important to them because you are willing to listen to them and share things so that they can express themselves, because expressing your feelings is so important. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
come out of post-traumatic stress. You
Yes.
know, it's so important that you feel uh, this feeling of importance. When I hit the beach of Normandy, I was Jack Gutman, Corpsman, first class. I did not feel important. I just had a job. I was a scared kid. And I hear these people when I hit the beach, and I did, as I said, not feeling important. I had no big rank. But when I heard a wounded guy in Normandy or Okinawa screaming to me, Doc, please help me, help me, I become I became the most important man in that soldier's life. There are a lot of people out there that you're going to run into every day that are screaming out to you, help me. Do that job and feel important and listen to them, and you'll be a help and you will feel much better.
Oh, Dad, that was really beautiful. You brought me to tears this time. That was really beautiful. I think that's the truth. There are so many humans out there who are either saying verbally or somewhere inside themselves, help me. And if that opportunity presents itself, even by just listening, you don't have to have any real special skills, but by just listening, you can change somebody's life. You can
Amen.
be that lifeline that they're really asking for.
Right.
So, Dad, I can't think of a more beautiful place for us to stop. And I have to say, this is my favorite interview with you that we've ever done because
Thank
I
you.
think what you just said is so beautiful and so right on. And there are people who really need to hear what you just said. And I hope that they're listening to this show. So bless you and thank you, Dad, for being
Thank
here
you.
today.
And thank you for having me on again. Uh, Touching lives, and this is what we both do, and that it makes you a better person. God bless you, and thank you, Paula.
Oh, and thank you, Dad. Bless you. And thank you to all my listeners. And remember that you can hear us on every major podcast platform. And we have a YouTube channel, a Facebook page, an Instagram page. It's all Change It Up Radio. So please, if you know someone who needs to hear what you heard today, share this show. And please subscribe and like us so we can keep bringing shows like this to people who need to hear the words that have been said today. So, blessings to all of you. Happy Veterans Day. And we'll see you next week. And by the way, as you know, the theme this fall season has been resiliency. And I think that today you saw the poster boy for resiliency, my dad, Jack Gutman.
Thank you.
All right. See you next week. Take care, everyone.